I want to go from insanity to cruelty. Sam Stein, my colleagues, Julie Ainsley and Jacob Soboroff, are reporting on Trump cabinet officials who voted in 2018 in favor of the family separation policy. This is from their reporting, which broke about an hour ago. Quote, in early May 2018, 11 of the president's most senior advisors were called to the White House Situation Room, where they were asked by a show of hands vote to decide the fate of thousands of migrant parents and their children. It's according to two officials who were there. No one in the meeting made the case that separating families would be inhumane or immoral. The officials said any moral argument regarding immigration fell on deaf ears. Inside the White House, said one of the officials, a sea of hands went up. Nielsen kept hers down. What do you make of what is coming out now about the president's use of the Department of Homeland Security? Some of it is from Miles Taylor, who is sort of telling his story publicly for the first time, former chief of staff there. But this story coming out, too, seemingly in concert.
So I just got to scan that report before coming on air, and the takeaway I had was just how much they looked at this issue as a bureaucratic government resource matter versus a moral, humane matter. The people who objected to the policy did so on grounds that they would not have the necessary resources to actually separate the family, deport them, and then reunite them with their children. Not that it was cruel. And it gets back to what I think was a theme of last night's convention.
Yeah.
I'll get to this a little bit long-windedly, but what we saw throughout the past 3.5 years was that people objected to Trump's policies who were involved in the crafting of them, but they never did so publicly, and they never resigned because of it. And because of their inability or unwillingness to do that, they implicitly enabled the president. So when Obama was speaking last night about the dire situation with respect to our future of democracy, he had a very biting line. He said, this is not an abandonment. You know, there are Republican principles and Democratic principles, but this is a problem created by Trump, and those who enabled him.
Yeah.
And I thought that was a very key line that Obama made, because he wasn't trying to just indict Trump. He was trying to indict a political party and a political ecosystem that allowed Trumpism, and to Nick's point, conspiracies like QAnon, which is nuts. Nick was very sophisticated in his description, but it's just nuts. And things like family separation to flourish without people objecting because of a moral objection to it. And that was what Obama was saying last night. That's the thrust of this report. And I think it's the definition of the Trump presidency to this point in time.
You know, Nick, it's such a good point. I mean, we've experienced sort of the human suffering as a consequence, but what maybe we overlook is that that was the point of a lot of this. And Stephen Miller, as an architect by this report, was making that case that this was a policy meant to deter, and the cruelty was the deterrent. It was the policy aim.
Yeah.
That's right. They wanted to cause pain, to cause fear, to deter these people from coming over, because they had made a decision that they had to be stopped. And of course, I think a lot of the country disagreed with them. I would just add one, a second point to this, Nicole. The market value of turning on President Trump from the inside is going to decline extremely fast in November. So I suspect part of what we're seeing here is a last chance by some people who have served the president and had misgivings to get their stories out before he is either reelected or defeated.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me, or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.